If it were your mother, 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 and somebody harmed her, harmed her, harmed her, you won't be happy. You won't be happy. Nobody woke up in this world to be hurt by another. Nobody woke up in this world to be killed by a lover, husband, boyfriend, other.
Yeah, this is the Ocean of Messenger, you're tuned to talk to telling it as it is. Lord, give them strength to face another day. Make it a long life's road and carry their heavy load. Give them the strength, oh, Jah, to carry on. Oh, my Lord.
My name is Robin White Morton. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. Just landed in Kingston, Jamaica. This is the only place where I feel comfortable, where I can actually tell my story, home, away from home. I wrote a book, Battered Women Tell Somebody, in 2013, and it was published in Birmingham, Alabama, where I currently reside. And I also wrote a song that goes with that book, You Won't Be Happy. That was recorded in New Orleans, Louisiana, several years ago. I had the opportunity to do a narrative with the same title, Battered Women Tell Somebody, where I did the work here in Kingston, Jamaica. I had a keyboard player from the Firehouse group. They call him Wrong Move. The engineer was great. I remember recording that song. It came back to me so easily. Pain never leaves. You just grow through it.
Robin White Morton. Born and raised in Carlton, Olive Grove, the city of New Orleans, state, Louisiana. From a child, she had the gift of music, singing, writing, performing. She took interest in art. In a family of 7, she was the middle child, 5 sisters, 1 brother. Although she grew up with mother, father, and her 6 siblings, most time she felt alone. She felt like a stepchild.
Even to this day, I still feel like I'm a stepchild and I'm not a part of the family, because some of the things that happen, I don't think a family member would do the things that I've experienced with my family. Sometimes I knew my mother would see things and she would say this thing sometimes, green is not becoming. And I knew that she knew that there was some type of strife going on in the family between my siblings and I. And when she spoke of green is not becoming, she would say jealousy is not a good look. She wanted it to cease, but it never stopped. One day, when we were sitting in the living room, my siblings and I, along with my mother, we were all laughing and having a good time, and my mother had a saucer in her hand, and she asked my sibling to take it to the back, and I too had a saucer in my hand, and I asked my sibling as they were going to the back to take it, and my mother looked at my family and said, "Don't you ever do another thing for her in your life." Right there confirmed that she was a part of a negative alliance against me. It was unforgivable. I was so hurt because I loved my mother. I loved my mother so much. I just couldn't imagine anything but having my mother, even though it was so many of us. I just wanted to be special to her. And that was part of my singing, I think, because she never accepted that. At the time, I was about 8 or 9, and we used to always get in the living room and perform for my mother, but my father never wanted us to dance or sing because we come from a background of ministers and cooks and stuff, and he didn't think it was godly, but my mother enjoyed us entertaining her. Make no mistake about this, I'm daddy's girl, and everyone knew it.
Robin considered herself daddy's girl, daddy's little girl. She loved him, and she knew he loves her too. Her father always got her back. Although she felt alone growing up in her family, her dad was not a part of that feelings. But mom give her every reason to believe she's a part of the negative alliance.
I was an inquisitive child, and my father always was there for me. Whenever I had a problem, I could go to him, and he'd let me talk and talk and talk and talk until I came up with the solution, which was always a good one. But he had patience with me, which I thank God to this day that he was there for me, because I don't know what I would have done. Remember, I'm a child, and if I would do something, sometimes my mother would say, "White, whipper, whipper." She called my father by our last name. And then I would say, "No, Daddy, no, no, Daddy, please." And I'd start running. We lived in a yard that was really big, and I'd run, and he'd say, "Come back here," because he had to satisfy my mother. And he says, "Come back here, you heifer, you." And I go, "Daddy, no, Daddy, no." Then I turn around, and even though I was running away, he had a switch. He was coming for me. And I turn and I run to him, and I take the whipping because my mother told my father to whip me. I just was whipped all the time for everything because I wanted to know about everything. I was a smart kid, and I loved discovering things. I got whippings for discovering things. Yeah. Touching something, looking at it. I might say something, and it was like, "Whipper, you're going to get a whipping." And sometimes, I don't know, it's just a lot. I never grew out of pain. As I grew older, I learned how to get away from it. When something hurts, I learned how to get away from it.
Robin's father whipped her because of her mom. Although she was young, she was not too young to understand. Her father had to please her mom. She never held it against him. She was still daddy's little girl, the one who always listened to her. And on most occasions, he prepared the answer for her questions. Although she was whipped for being technical, inquisitive, and curiosity. Today, the things that she was whipped for is the very same thing that makes her.
As a parent, I always taught my children the importance of learning where something comes from, the nucleus of it, the beginning. Where did it come from? And once you find out where it came from, then you can begin to understand it. But you have to always go back to the beginning in order to really get a grasp on what the manifestation of something great could be. So those are some of the things that has kept me. And my father taught me how to do that because I used to watch him break things down and build them back up. And that's part of who we are. I also was speaking to a parent and I was telling them, they were saying that their kid just break everything up that they get. And I said, sometimes you have to break it down in order to understand it. The child isn't destructive. They're actually learning. And the reason why they leave it there is because they understand it now. They didn't take it apart to tear it apart. They took it apart to understand how it was made, keeping in mind that that very child may become an inventor one day because they were able to take that object apart. Whenever my mom would beat me for whatever reason, I don't think she really understood that I was just trying to learn about what was happening. That's why I was asking all the questions. But my father got it. You could be in a family with both parents, and sometimes you can feel like a stepchild in that family. I mean, you can feel like the black sheep of the family amongst your siblings. I remember my younger sister looked at me one day and she said, "How is it that God gave you all the talent and we don't have nothing?" She was very venomous when she said it, so much so when one of my sisters passed on, she didn't even put my name in the obituary. That was different. Even when my other sister passed, I wrote a poem and my younger sister wouldn't put it in the obituary. It's my belief that she wouldn't put it in there because she wasn't going to give me any clout as a talent, as a poet or anything like that. And it goes back to how she felt when she spoke her voice. And when my older sister used to babysit us, she used to beat me with a wooden brush every time my mother left. And she told, when I was a baby, she wouldn't change me. And my mother said when she came home and she went to change my diaper, my skin on my body came off with the diaper. My older sister had such a bitter spirit when it came to me. I just never understood it. And I asked her one day, I said, "Do we have beef?" Because that was the only way that I could ask her. And I was hurting because I loved my sister. I have so much love for my family, but I think they realized most of all that the more they didn't love me, the more it hurt. And they would get together as a group and make sure that I was miserable as often as possible. I also recall throwing a party for my daughter-in-law and her family, my son, newly married bride, and I invited my entire family, and nobody showed up, but they had a party the next day at my other sister's house. And I went to a party once at my sister's house, who cooks a lot, and my sibling's boyfriend said, "What is she doing here? She didn't put any money in here." And I told my children, "Come on, guys, let's go home." So we went home. And my youngest son is a recording artist, and he had a record release party in New Orleans, and he was a jazz singer, recording artist at age 12. I took 2 years to prepare his party. We had over 200 people at the party, and none of my family members showed up, and I sent formal invitations out to everyone else. To everyone. And my siblings said they never received it, but I never got anything that came back in the mail that said it wasn't delivered. They received it. They just wasn't going to support me. And when I was in 10th grade in homeroom class, my brother set my hair on fire. And I just sat there and let it burn. And then my classmates started putting the fire out. And I just realized as I got older, if I would have started running, what would have really happened? The fire would have been greater. I would have looked like a different person. Or probably I would have died. My brother always thought I was smarter than he was. But I never thought that. I always thought he was smarter than I was because he was an excellent test taker. And I had to study to do well, but he just did it with ease. Part of the reason I'm the way I am now is because of my oldest sister. She was always on the honor roll and an A student, and I wanted to be just like her because I loved my sister. And so I excelled, and I wanted to make my mother and my father proud. And my mother told us, if you embarrass the family, whenever you do anything wrong, you don't just embarrass yourself, you embarrass the entire family. And I was a good girl. Once I was pregnant with my daughter, who I lost. Her name was Janae Chenier. And when I was pregnant, I was staying at my mother's because I was having a problem and I wanted to eat. And I was like, I went to eat and my sister said, don't give her anything. Don't give her, and I was pregnant. She said, don't give her anything. Don't give her any food. She said, and I looked at my mother and my mother looked at me. And it was as if she was agreeing that I couldn't eat anything and I was so hungry. And I was pregnant. And I looked at my mother and I said, I hate you. I said, I hate you. I hate you. And I went out. I was in the middle of the street and I remember looking at my mother and saying, I hate you. I hate you. And I went to Mrs. Collins' house, one of our neighbors, and I went into her house because she always had an open door. She was over the Republic of New Africa, and she was also my mentor. When I went to her house, I went in, it was early in the morning, and she said, I looked at her and I just started crying. I was like, oh my, oh. And she said, what's the matter, child? I said, I'm so hungry. She said, what is going on? I said, my mother wouldn't feed me. And she said, Mary. She said, what is wrong with Mary? She said that Bitch. I said, my sisters told her I shouldn't be having any food because I didn't have any money. I had just come from St. Louis, my children and I. And I was staying at my mother's. And I just cried and cried. And Miss Collins fixed food for me and she gave me food. And after I ate it, I was so upset. Just threw everything up, But I knew I could always go to her because she was my nurse when I was little when I got bit by a dog. And she gave me all of my shots. But I loved her. Another thing happened after I had my daughter. Soon after, on my job, I had to go on a retreat. And my family wanted to keep my daughter. And because they were so cruel to me, I wouldn't let them keep her. And 2 weeks later, she was dead. My mother used to hide me. When I was a baby, I didn't have hair in the middle. It didn't grow in the middle of my head. And when we were in the car, every time I would try and peep up, she'd push my head back down. And again, as a baby, I still wanted to see the world. And I believe that That's where the rejection and the abuse came in. I even wrote a book on Battered Women Tell Somebody and did a musical vocal on it, as well as a song, You Won't Be Happy. This is where my abuse started when I became an adult. My mother forced me to marry someone I didn't want to marry. And that was the beginning of real abuse, battered, beaten. And all of that started when my father passed. That song, Battered Women Tell Somebody, was recorded right there in Kingston, Jamaica. Yeah, that song was recorded in tears. It's a sad one. I don't think I could ever perform that song live. It's not written so. Every time I would tell that song, it would be the truth. I would just be saying what is really happened. You may hear some things that's not even in the song, and they may just come out. We'll be very transparent. The man that I was married to, my abuser, I never wanted to marry him. As a matter of fact, my mother made him marry me, or made him marry me, that is. I don't ever remember him asking me to marry him. Because when a guy asks a female to marry them, that's something we always remember. He just came to the house from college as a friend, and my mother said he reminded her of her ex-husband and that I was going to marry him. Imagine marrying someone that you never had a desire to ever marry, that you were just friends, and it was awful. And I would talk to my mother about it, and she said, at least you have two beautiful children. But that's not, it takes nothing from my children. I love them. But I wasn't pregnant. It was a lot of beating and abuse, and I even lost a child from the domestic violence situation. It's just a lot, yeah. I'm back in Jamaica now to release this compilation. Check it out. It seems to resonate extremely well with men. I'll be releasing it, so I'll let you know. It'll be on various platforms. So when I speak with you again, you'll know where you can get it.